Hi, welcome to Zeke Talk. My name is Jim Tudor. I'm the co-founder of ZekeFilm.org, and with me today is author and film historian Matt Berry. Matt has written a new ebook, which is actually a compilation of film writing that he's done for various other websites over the years. And the title of the book is Return to the Kingdom of Shadows. Matt, good to have you here.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
So, Return to the Kingdom of Shadows. That is a very fun title. Let's talk about that for just a minute. What brought you to the point of naming this compilation Return to the Kingdom of Shadows? Maybe you could take just a second and explain what you mean by Kingdom of Shadows.
Sure. Well, that title is a reference to the 1896 film review, possibly the first film review by the writer Maxim Gorky that he wrote in response to seeing a program of Lumiere films in Russia. And the Return to the Kingdom of Shadows title came to me a few years ago when I had visited the Museum of the Moving Image in Queens when I was living in New York. And I've got this story. It's the first piece in this book. I had this idea because I was watching this exhibit on it was a shadow projector that sort of harkens back to the earliest very simple kinds of motion pictures, the most rudimentary types of moving images. And as I was watching this exhibit, it kind of brought me back to that. And I remember there was a small child there, kind of fascinated with the projection of his own shadow. And it really took me back to what it must have been like for those first movie audiences just to be experiencing moving images on the screen for the first time. So I had thought of Maxim Gorky's essay about this idea of referring to cinema as the kingdom of shadows, and this idea of the return to the kingdom of shadows is kind of revisiting that initial excitement that people must have felt at the time.
It's not a return, a sequel to a previous book you've written.
Right. Yeah, I was afraid there might be some confusion on that, but no, this is not a sequel.
Oh no, and I love that story. You included that in the beginning of the book about the child so fascinated with the shadow play, and I have had a similar experience along the lines of what you write about. Now, in your book, just to let people know, I'm holding this e-reader as though it's the book. It's an e-book. It's there's no physical copy available yet. But it is an ebook for everybody listening, and it's a great deal, by the way. I think I got mine through Amazon for, just a few bucks. So it's a fantastic thing. I just want to get that out there, and we can talk more about how people can get the book later.
Okay.
But yeah, as I was saying, years ago, I'm in St. Louis, and at our local university where I now teach, Webster University, they had an evening of live accompaniment with the film Safety Last, with the Harold Lloyd film that you chronicle in the book. And I'm thinking, well, who's going to come see this movie from 1928 or whatever? It was packed. It was packed.
Right.
Completely sold out. Now I know the live accompaniment is a big draw.
Yeah.
But at the end, there were grandparents who brought very young grandchildren, and those kids come running up, and they were just so excited about having watched Harold Lloyd scale the building.
Yeah.
So that it's that kind of magic that I can imagine, reading your take on these. There's a lot of obscure silent films that you cover, particularly comedies, and also early work by like Georges Méliès and whatnot. How did you unearth those?
Well, I've always really been drawn to silent film, especially silent comedy, and a lot of the early pieces that I wrote for my blog back in 2005, 2006 were focused around that. So there was a lot of silent film, a lot of silent comedy. I think I have one or maybe even two pieces in there about Harry Langdon, who I think in some ways is I don't want to say he's not forgotten by the silent comedy aficionados, certainly, but I think he doesn't quite have the same sort of visibility that Chaplin, Keaton, Lloyd have today. So when I was going through and picking out some of these pieces, I wanted to include those because Langdon is a really interesting figure who, as I said, I don't think he has quite the same visibility that the other major three comedians have. And then as far as Georges Méliès, he's another filmmaker whose work has just fascinated me for a really long time. In fact, I think the earliest memory I have of a film, oddly enough, it's a strange movie to have as your earliest memory, but is Trip to the Moon. And I can't imagine where I would have seen it. I was extremely young. I think I had I remembered the image. I even really remembered what the film was, or knew what the film was. So that image of the moon I'm referring to with the rocket landing in its eye. So that was that led me to explore a lot of Méliès' work as soon as that started becoming available. And with so much of his work now out on DVD, I had kind of begun to go through and just take notes on the individual films as I was going through them. So you'll see a lot of those in the early chapters of the book as well.
Yeah, you do go through in the early chapters of the book. You're chronicling the career of Méliès and Porter.
Porter, yes, yep.
Yeah, and going through who made Great Train Robbery, and you go through film by film, doing a capsule review just of these very short films, very short write-ups, and very succinct. By the way, I was impressed with that. Very, very succinct, very, very to the point, not tremendously, wordy in the academic sense, but very approachable. And you seem to have a great passion for communicating the what it is about silent cinema and early cinema that keeps it relevant and matters. Could you speak to that?
Sure. I think, well, as far as Porter goes, he's a figure who's been well researched by other historians, like in much greater depth, like Charles Musser. But what I found interesting in going through his films, again, as they were starting to become available and good quality copies, and you could really see the detail and everything in these images. What I found really fascinating about them is we know Edwin S. Porter for the Great Train Robbery. We might see The Life of an American Fireman. So we know his narrative films and his contributions in that, in storytelling and narrative cinema. But what I found interesting was the sheer scope of the different types of films that he was making for Edison's company. And so as I was watching them, what I thought was interesting is to go through and to look for any kind of visual consistencies from film to film, or anything that he was doing differently that maybe isn't as well known compared to his contributions with a film like The Great Train Robbery. So that's what kind of got me looking closer at these relatively obscure early films. Some of them lasting only maybe less than a minute, but I was just trying to see how he was photographing his subjects, how he was choosing subjects, and what consistency there was from one film to the next. And as far as the significance of it, it kind of gets back to my original original question about the Return to the Kingdom of Shadows. And that is, I think early cinema still has a lot of power to surprise us, because it was this time when so much was being tried out, so many different things, before movies had really settled into the kind of narrative format that we expect, I think, even today. And one of the things that fascinated me when I started writing those pieces on Porter, and this was back around 2007, I believe, or 2008, it was to kind of compare it with the emerging online video world of YouTube and just the sheer variety of videos that you would find out there. And I mean, other people have made this connection between early film and then what was happening with the internet at that time and online video. But that was just a connection I found really interesting. So I tried to pick that up and run with it as I was looking at all these different types of films that he was making. And the same can be said of Méliès too.
Yeah, with Méliès, you detail a lot of the fantasy work, of course, which is what Georges Méliès is known for. Uh, his early pioneering trip to the moon, and working with visual effects and using film as a magic trick. But people don't know that he worked in so many other genres as well. And you have included many of those works here as well. So in a well-rounded, roundup of Méliès, which we don't see all that often when, he is brought up.
Right. And I find those interesting for the same reason I find a lot of the Porter films interesting. It's just that sheer variety that he was working in at that time. And that's really true, I think, of it's representative of the variety of really all of cinema in those early years before 1905, 1908.
Yeah, and speaking of variety, also in Return of the Kingdom of Shadows, your book here, you cover a very impressive landscape of early film comedy. We mentioned Harold Lloyd. He gets a chapter. Keaton gets a chapter. So many get a chapter, and you work well into talkies with Preston Sturges and the Marx Brothers. Do you have a particular love of comedy that urged you to write all of these essays about that particular type of filmmaking?
Yeah, I mean, I love comedy films, and especially the classic comedies, The Silence, and like you mentioned, the Marx Brothers. Maybe lesser known today comedians like Wheeler and Woolsey, who I also have a piece in there about, and right up to Jerry Lewis, Woody Allen, Jacques Tati. So yeah, these are all people that I really admire and enjoy their films, and it gave me a lot to write about just by virtue of having watched them so many times over the
the rewatchability.
It's comedies are a genre a film that I have a real affection for.
Yeah, it's pretty clear here that it's early films, it's comedy. Anybody with a liking or a curiosity about those forms, that area of cinema, really needs to get this ebook. I think it's territory that's been covered, in other books, of course. But I'm gonna, I'm gonna flatter you just a little here, okay? And say that what I appreciate here is, like I said, the straightforwardness of it, but the way you're able to weave the, and I say this as a website editor who manages other people's writing all the time. You've included the plot synopsis, of course, which is always a mandatory thing. But there's all kinds of commentary. You weave in a lot of behind the scenes factoids and little elements that flesh out the entire thing. Why any particular topic matters to film history is kind of inherent here. So I just wanted to say that is a particularly good selling point of this book, and thank you for that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I when I was writing a lot of these pieces for website, well, for my own blog, and then also for websites, one thing that's always important to me, and what I've always really admired about film writers who I guess have either influenced me, however you want to say, or just whose work I admire, is that they convey that enthusiasm for the movies they're writing about and make you want to see them. And I always come back to William K. Everson as sort of the model for this for me. I mean, he wrote many books and articles over the years, and his books were probably my introduction really to film writing, and so he had a real gift for making you want to go out and see the films that he was writing about. So it's kind of important to me when I'm talking about them to try to get some of that enthusiasm across, because that is ultimately my hope, is that people will go out and check out some of these films that they might not have been familiar with before.
And how can they do that? I know some are available on disc, some are available online. Do you have to dig deeper than that?
I don't know that you do. I mean, there's so much available online now, especially from the early silent films. It's with the public domain. There's so much archival access now through websites like the Internet Archive and on YouTube. I mean, as far as early cinema goes, I think that's really a rich field now that you can explore, thanks to a lot of the archives. I mean, the Library of Congress is making a lot of their materials available now on their website. But as far as silent films, I mean, I think we're in a time when so much is becoming available on DVD and Blu-ray, and then as far as the classic comedies go, there have been nice collections of work by W.C. Fields, Laurel and Hardy, the Marx Brothers. So I feel like for people who want to see the films, it's in some ways it's never been easier to be able to find them.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That's a very good point. So, yes, this is a fantastic thing. Have you done previous writing? Are there other books, other collections available of other things, or is this your first
No,
published?
this is the first one, and like I said, it kind of grew out of, well, it's been almost what, 14, 15 years now of writing for my personal blog, and then I don't do it really so much anymore, but writing for other websites where I had some really nice opportunities to write about films I was passionate about, and also to take a look at reviewing new independent films and things like that. So I got some really nice experiences through that. And it was about a year and a half ago, I decided it might be time to start to kind of bring all this together a little bit and put it into one place. And so that's really how the idea for the project came together. But it is the first book I've done, the first collection of writing like this that I've done.
Yeah, but as someone who, again, runs a film website and has also been a contributor to other film websites as well.
Yeah.
I'm sitting on my own long-standing body of work and starting to think the same thing. Is it book time? We've done all this work. It literally tends to pay nothing. So it's nice to give it a second life and get it out there for anybody who might be interested. A lot of times, the old websites with this stuff on it are not that easy to access anymore. So yeah, it's all about giving it that second, third, fourth life. So yeah, that's great. Are you still
certainly as a writer yourself?
I'm sorry, it dropped out.
I was just going to say that I'm sure as a writer yourself, though, that it's nice to kind of have everything come together like that. Let's see. Am I back yet?
I just heard you say, "Are you back? Am I back yet?" Yes, you are, I guess.
Okay.
Do you think you could repeat that last bit?
Okay. Sure. I was just saying, as a writer yourself, I'm sure you know that it's really nice to kind of be able to see all your work come together. And sometimes when you're writing a lot of reviews over the years or for different websites or whatever, you don't always stop and realize just how much work you're accumulating, basically. And so it is nice to sort of be able to go back and parse through it. And some of the pieces in this I did edit or expand a little bit, so they're not all copied verbatim. But it's nice to have it all in one place like this.
Absolutely. What is your background in film? Did you study film formally, or tell us about that?
Sure. Well, I guess as far as my interest in film goes back, almost as long as I can remember. So it was always something I was reading about whenever I had a chance, or watching, if there was some obscure silent film that was going to be showing somewhere or on, TV after, 1 o'clock in the morning, I would make an effort to see it. And but so when it came time, I was sort of trying to decide what to do with this interest, I originally studied film production at college, and over during those years, I continued. It was during the time I started my blog, and I was kind of moving further and further into, I guess, the film studies side of film and of studying film. And so I ended up going off to NYU for grad school and studying cinema studies there. So that's really kind of been the trajectory of my studying film. It's been really a lifelong interest that I carried with me through through college and then into the work I'm currently doing now. I'm teaching part-time teaching film history. So it's kind of been nice to bring all that experience together like that.
It's a film history class on the university
Yes.
level?
Yep.
Yeah, very nice. That is what I'm doing too. Yep. So the solidarity. Nice. Yeah, end of the semester, by the way. I don't know about you, but I've got a pile of term papers that are taunting me.
That'll be next week for me. Yeah.
So yeah, tomorrow night, final. But anyhow, yeah, it really, I don't know if you share this observation, Matt, but for me, I did the same thing. I went and studied filmmaking. Along the way, I realized what I really love is writing, and I really love film criticism. And just kind of started running with those things. In the meantime, keeping my foot in the production world. And I've worked on some pretty big movies in the art department and whatnot over the years. But it's the writing and the teaching, that, really ignites the love of film that brought me to filmmaking in the first place. And when I work on a set, a professional set, with professional film workers, this is not a shared thing. It's a very lonely thing to be on a set, or to be a film, a professional commercial or film set, and actually care about movies and want to talk about movies. People, it just doesn't happen. Have you ever come across that?
I've noticed that there are. I think there's a lot of times that maybe people think that film production and film studies are two very different things, and in many ways they are. But yeah, for me, it's kind of a natural overlap of these two interests. So I guess I'm always a little surprised when I meet people who work in production who maybe don't have any interest whatever in the history of the medium or anything like that. So it is surprising to me but then I kind of remember, it doesn't seem like it's maybe as common as I think that there should be this overlap. Share your feelings on that.
Yeah, it's a strange thing, and it's sad to me, honestly. But I'm happy as a clam, getting into academia now. So anyhow, this is the book is Return to the Kingdom of Shadows, and I mentioned that it's available any number of ways. I got mine through Amazon, delivered to my wife's e-reader here. How else can people get this book?
Right. Well, I self-published it through a website called lulu.com. So I believe you can go to lulu.com, and I guess if you search my name or the title, it should come up. You can get it there. It's also available for e-readers. Again, this is an e-book. It's available, as you mentioned, through Amazon and Barnes & Noble and Apple Books and the Kobo service.
That's fantastic.
So those are the platforms that's out there on it.
I would not know where to begin with this process of, putting it out there. So kudos for getting it done. All right. It's, I guess we wrap it up. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Matt?
No, just it's been great to have the opportunity to come on here and talk with you about it. And like I said, if anyone checks out the book, I hope it'll also inspire you in turn to check out some of these films and discover something new.
Yeah, it's a great guide. You can kind of checklist along the way because Matt's broken up his chapters in at least a lot of them like I said, the Edward Porter chapter and onward, you can just kind of go through, and the titles are all in nice all capital letters, so you can just see them right there and say, "Oh, got to see that movie, got to see that movie," and then watch them. So yeah, it's as simple as that. And the book, by the way, is a steal. So just for everybody to know, there's no reason not to get this. And you support independent film writing here, which is always nice. Matt, thanks so much.
Thank you, Jim.
We'll see everybody later on Zeke Talk. Go to zekefilm.org for my own film writing. I can also be found at Screen Anarchy and as a contributor. At Zeke Film, we have an array of volunteer writers, like Matt said he used to do, contributing all the time. Lots of great reviews, mostly reviews of new films and old films and Blu-ray and home video and that sort of thing. So we have a diversity of voices. We don't do nonsense. We just do. We just concentrate on the movies and what makes them worthwhile or not worthwhile. So please check us out at zekefilm.org. And again, the book is Return to the Kingdom of Shadows by Matt Berry.
And if I could just inject one last shameless plug for if you enjoy the book and want to check out more of my writing, you can see that on my blog, which is The Art and Culture of Movies, artandcultureofmovies.blogspot.com.
Art and Culture of Movies.
Yeah.
.blogspot.com. All right. Well, we'll throw that link in there too, because that is that's the current ongoing blog, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Fantastic. All right, Matt. Well, thank you.
All right. Thanks again.